Welcome to the podcast about venture capital, where investors and founders alike can learn how VCs make decisions and reach conviction. Your host is Nick Moran, and this is The Full Ratchet.
Matt Higgins joins us today from New York City. Matt is a serial entrepreneur and growth equity investor as co-founder and CEO of RSE Ventures, a firm that he co-founded with Stephen Ross. RSE has made numerous noteworthy investments: Assembly OSM, VaynerMedia, and Magnolia Bakery, to name a few. Matt has also spent 2 seasons as a guest on Shark Tank and is the host and executive producer of Business Hunters, a show that will be airing soon on CNBC. Matt, I feel like I'm just scratching the surface of your background with this introduction, but welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me.
We're going to get into the founding of RSE in a moment, but I'd like to start with your background. As mentioned in the introduction, you have a wide-ranging set of experiences that we'll go through today, but I'd like to go back to the very beginning and talk just a bit about your childhood. For those that don't know, can you share the story of your upbringing and the lessons that you took away from your childhood that set you up for success in your career?
Yeah, that's a big question. But I grew up in Queens, New York. I was raised by a single mom who was great, very smart, but didn't have a lot of tools to compete with her disability. Knees were going since I was pretty young. She ended up in a wheelchair by the time I was 26. She was a high school dropout, and after she got divorced from my dad, she went back to college on a GED, which also influenced many of my decisions. I can get to that in a second. So my background in my early life was single mom, poverty, 4 miserable boys, selfish, rotten kids doing their own thing, and really me fending for myself from a very early age. I learned the power of work and education the hard way. Started selling flowers when I was 11 years old, actually, on the streets of Queens. I was that kid that would knock on your window and try to sell you a $10 bouquet on Easter. And I would sell handbags at flea markets on top of a van, $5 leather handbags. I just did basically every job, including working at McDonald's. And so that was my early background. And I learned a few important lessons. One, there's no cavalry coming, despite how much you might wish one would come in the dead of night, and that you have to take matters in your own hand. And 2, no one really has context into what you're going through, so you have to be careful about how you take advice from others. What I mean by that, as a kid, back then at least, you were always trying to hide your poverty. I would do anything I could to get a pair of hand-me-down designer jeans so I wouldn't look like the quote-unquote poor kid from Bayside, Queens. And as a result, anybody giving me advice about how to navigate my childhood had no idea what I was going through taking care of my mother and how she was slowly deteriorating, how I would go to bed hungry, how we would live in shame, going to food pantries on the weekend, taking a bus an hour away so no one would see us. There was just a whole element of my life that was secret. And why I say that is because I think a lot of us carry a lot of shame and we don't share the true extent of our pain. And as a result, the advice we get is distorted. So I'll stop here, but I made a very radical decision when I was 16 years old, which everyone said was completely nuts, which changed the entire course of my life.
I'd love to double click on that. What was that inflection point in your life?
I didn't think you would ask. So I, like I said, I was really struggling, and my mother had gotten a GED as a child. She had no choice, but I watched her go with that GED and get enrolled into City College. And I had an epiphany when I was around 13 years old, making $3.75 an hour at McDonald's, that if I could become a college student as fast as humanly possible, suddenly the jobs changed in the local penny saver. They went from being grunt work to suddenly making $8 an hour, $9 an hour, handing out flyers for a congressman, for example. But all I needed to do was get myself into college. And suddenly the plan became, how do I get myself into college so I can increase my earning power as quickly as possible and pull forward my future? And I decided I needed to drop out. And I was going to drop out of high school, get my GED at 16, start college at 16, and double my pay overnight, which sounds perfect when you're 13, 14 years old, mapping it all out. But then you really have to execute. And that was the second epiphany I had, was that there was so much pressure once I started screwing up school to reverse course. No one thought this plan made any sense, including my guidance counselor. And I realized that for me to fully commit, I needed to set the conditions up to reinforce my commitment. I needed to burn the boats. And so I decided I was going to fail every single class high school, so I would have no choice but to execute my plan when I turned 16. So I did. except for typing. Typing I felt was useful. So I still to this day type 100 words a minute, but I gave myself no option and I ended up going forward with it. I'll skip the next 20 years, but the bottom line is it worked out. Within a couple of months, I was enrolled in college at 16. I had a job that paid twice as much. I had, with one chess move, rewrote the story of my life. The look I used to get from my teachers was one of pity, and suddenly it was one of respect. And I had pulled forward my entire career by 2 years. It didn't come fast enough to save my mother, but it definitely increased my earning potential and made bad situation better for her. So if I had listened to everyone at the time who said, you need to finish high school, you need to stay the course, I think my entire career would have been different. I never would have had this paradigm of burn the boats and go all in and just got to be a little bit defiant and trust your instincts. I would have ignored all my internal navigation systems in favor of supposed expertise. And I don't think I'd be sitting here talking to you with the career I've had.
Now, with all of your success today, do you feel like you've reached any sort of level of content in your career, or do you still have that chip on your shoulder, need to prove something, to be defiant? Like, how has your mindset evolved over time as you've attained more and more success?
It's such a great question. I would prefer to lie to you at this moment and tell you that I am now at the top of Maslow's hierarchy and completely self-actualized and realized. But the reality is, not only do I not feel content, I don't feel particularly successful because I only focus on that which isn't working out according to my plan. I spend an incredible amount of energy auditing my own decision-making when things don't play out the way I planned, because I'm always trying to hack myself or the universe or unlock a pattern. I think that's the very definition of a growth mindset. I've come to realize that you can go to the mountaintop and realize there's not much to see, right? That I've been blessed to achieve the pinnacle of a lot of different industries, but no one particular aspect of success made me feel content or in any way diminish the desire to strive. So I've come to realize that the joy of living really is in the striving, unfortunately, because it would be a lot simpler if we could just, like the race, do well and then collapse and relax, watch some Netflix and just call it a day. But I found that it's not the way it works. And that the sooner you realize that joy comes from perpetual pursuit of trying to figure out, where is the ceiling of my potential? What does God have in store for me? That's what this is all about. So I no longer try to achieve contentment to any serious degree. I like to achieve pride. I think pride is important. I think if you can't value your own endeavors, then something's maybe wrong, right? Your body's trying to tell you something, your mind's telling you something. So you should be able to experience pride. And I really work at that to feel good about what I've achieved, but I no longer look for resolution in anything I do. And I spend a lot of time battling imposter syndrome. Talk about it in a generic way now, which is good, imposter syndrome, but I think imposter syndrome is nuanced. Anyone who is trying to break out and break into something new is going to feel imposter syndrome because they are, in fact, an imposter until you've achieved it. And because I'm always trying to do something uncomfortable, I'm constantly battling with that every day and trying to talk myself out of it.
Yeah. And to your point about the ride, it definitely seems the joy is in the getting, not the having, the pursuit. And you've been in pursuit in a number of different areas of your career. Prior to RSE, you started your career, I believe it was in journalism, if I read that correctly, then eventually transitioned into operations at the New York Jets. How did you initially get involved with the NFL, and how did that lead to the co-founding of RSE with Stephen Ross?
Yeah, you have to look at your career as a series of attempts to connect different dots and, frankly, to leverage the dot that came before in order to do the next one. So I've always asked myself this question: what can I do today that I couldn't do yesterday that brings me closer to what I want to do tomorrow? So it's like this sort of loop. And what I mean by that is certain experiences that you want to achieve or have in life can only be achieved until you have the thing that comes before that sets you up, right? So, for example, I probably wouldn't be teaching at Harvard Business School if I didn't go on Shark Tank. And those two might not seem perfectly correlated or related, but they are, because once I went on Shark Tank, which was incredibly uncomfortable, and we can get to that, I said, all right, what unfulfilled ambitions do I have that might be a little bit easier to get some attention for than I could have gotten before I went on the show? And I always wanted to teach. And now I had no background in teaching, potentially no business in teaching, but I had a passion for it. And I spent a year of my life making the case. And fast forward, I've been involved with Harvard Business School for 4 years. So it's a long way of saying There's always the thing that came before that put me in a position to do it. The reason I got into sports was after 9/11, I was the mayor's press secretary during the attack, and I became one of the first employees of a new agency charged with rebuilding the World Trade Center. And that gave me tremendous experience in navigating land use situations, dealing with different constituencies, public-private partnerships, all the same skills you would need to build a stadium. And I leveraged those skills when I had finished my tour of duty in the government. We had settled on a plan for the World Trade Center site. I leveraged those skills to get a job at the Jets, which had been nomads for 4 decades trying to find a home of their own, and they needed somebody who could help run that effort. So if you were looking closely, you'd say, well, sports and government have nothing to do with each other. I don't know how these jobs are connected. The connection is how one led to the other. And that is 100% true about every single thing I have done. And that is the pattern, figuring out how to leverage the thing you've just done to get you closer to what you ultimately want to be doing. Understanding you'll never quite answer that question.
Awesome. So we'll be going deeper on RSE in a moment, which has done numerous great investments. But what led to starting the show Business Hunters? I've been alluding to your book, Burn the Boats, but you're also coming out with the show Business Hunters. And I'd be curious if you can give the audience a primer for what the show is about and what everyone can expect.
Yeah, I'm so excited about this show. I love Shark Tank, not just in the United States, but around the world. And I was on 2 seasons of Shark Tank. But if you take a step back, you realize while we love the show, the act of seeking VC money is pretty foreign to most people. And most businesses that we run in this country are not the types of businesses you're going to seek an investor, right? They're designed to create a lifestyle, take care of your family, leave a legacy behind. So there's a missing show in the world that documents what's it like to quit your job and actually own your own business. Like, how does it work? So many people have this desire to be free, call the shots, and leave something behind. But how do you do it? And maybe they've saved up $100,000 after working really hard and they got the money to do it. They have the ambition, but there's a gap in going from point A to point B. So that was the genesis for this show. It's a Mark Burnett production. He's one of the creators of Shark Tank, The Apprentice, The Voice, just an incredible producer. Wanted to really document this journey for all the people in the world who are looking to make that leap. I'm an executive producer on the show, along with Mark Burnett, and I am the host. And the show takes oftentimes a couple, it doesn't have to be, who know generally what they want. Maybe it's a restaurant. Maybe they want to buy a marina. Maybe they've always wanted a dry cleaner. It could literally be anything. They come to us, and we, with a team of brokers, present them with 3 different ideas. And the show documents me dissecting those businesses, helping them look at it, helping them dissect their own motivations. What are some common misperceptions that people have going into a business? For example, I'm gonna buy a pizzeria and it's great. We're gonna have more time to spend on the weekends. It's like, no, you won't. It's a cash business. You're gonna be working there all the time. Like a lot of the common misperceptions. And it's magical because at the end of the show, if everything works out, they're ready to make an offer. And ideally, there's a meeting of the minds and they walk away with the keys to their own business. I am so excited about it. I love helping the underdog. I love the journey of transcendence, of trying to break out of your circumstances and achieve your dreams. Everybody I meet on the show, this is one of the best parts. Everybody who is choosing to go in this direction has something really magical about the way they look at the world and opportunity. You know, you might be sitting on Wall Street running a hedge fund and think you'd have nothing in common with someone from Hialeah, Florida, who runs 5 B&Bs. And it turns out they have everything in common. They have this desire to call the shots and this creativity and this little sparkle in their eyes. So I love the way it shows how the entrepreneurial journey, no matter how big or small, is effectively the same thing. It's the pursuit of freedom and potential and opportunity.
And when does the show premiere?
So we still don't have a launch date. Could be this year or sometime next year. It's on CNBC, which is also great. CNBC is doing a lot more content around extending business means, right? What business means to more and more people. I'm assuming either end of this year, sometime in the spring.
All right. Keep an eye out for that. Do you want to transition back to RSE? Because following, I believe it was your stint with the Dolphins, you co-founded RSE with Stephen Ross. And for those that don't know Stephen Ross, I mean, he is a pinnacle in the business world. I'm curious, what was the inspiration behind RSE and what is the thesis that you guys have?
I spent a lot of years in sports. I ran the business of the New York Jets and I oversaw the business of the Dolphins before we brought in an amazing CEO. So I have a pretty good sense of sports business and the culture of innovation at a lot of teams, or frankly, the lack thereof. The teams have enormous reach in our society, sports does. And as a result, they can be very picky about the innovation they adopt, right? To some extent, it almost becomes like a form of monopolistic power, right? They're not really going anywhere. And they're very reluctant to innovate prematurely, which makes sense in some respects because these are mature brands and you want to make sure you protect the brand. But on the flip side, there's just so much ability to reach people and really work on innovation. And I had found after working around football for years and years, a lot of times I was just frustrated. Like, why do we have to wait so long to embrace Facebook back in the day? Like, why can't we take a shot at Snapchat? It just seemed the bar to innovation was too high. And that was almost an institutional bias across sports with some exceptions. And the opportunity I saw was if you could put together a portfolio of great brands with a sports team at the epicenter, one, you can unlock a ton of potential for those brands, but you could also drive innovation back to the team in a way that creates this ecosystem, this sort of family of businesses. It sounds very abstract, but in the end, to make it a little bit less abstract, one of the first big deals we did in partnership with Steve was to back Gary Vaynerchuk. Became his only investor back in 2015. It had been an idea I'd been thinking about for years. I actually was Gary's first client at the Jets, gave him four Jets tickets to start the firm. And I went back and became partners with him. Why? If you have a sports team at the center of your sort of burgeoning empire, owning a large digital media firm, social media firm, and having that constantly refreshed expertise is only going to help the team be a leader in the space. And fast forward, VaynerMedia is probably the largest privately held advertising firm focused on social media in the world, maybe even the largest privately held firm in the world. So it's worked out. So imagine that general idea playing out across many investments. I ultimately invested in Momofuku with Dave Chang, Milk Bar with Christina Tosi, wrote the first check into the Drone Racing League. So it's the idea of creating this ecosystem of innovation with a sports team at the center.
The thesis makes a ton of sense, and your background's in sports as well. And again, makes a ton of sense.
We were back in the day selling robotics into teams, right? So you understand how surprising it is to convince teams to be innovative, right?
It's still a challenge for them. Yeah. I mean, we built something that we thought is providing a ton of value, but developing the market was perhaps even more challenging than developing the technology itself. They're very slow to adopt new tech because they have a lot of power.
To anyone out there who's thinking about creating a business in this sector, my only caution to you is you don't want to be overly dependent upon one specific client or subset of clients to make your entire business work. And I think when you're passionate about sports, that can blind you and you think, oh, everyone's going to want this new analytics tool that I came up with or this new piece of hardware like you came up. That may be true in the abstract, but in the reality, teams are going to want it for free. They're going to presume that you're going to do a lot with their endorsement, and therefore you're going to make money just on the fact that they view a deal. But if the only entities you're trying to sell to are also sports entities, right? Giving stuff away for free or dramatic discounts, you're going to run out of clients to sell things to. So I like businesses where you leverage the relationship with a sports team to give you the endorsement and an early use case that you then take to a much broader market. That to me makes a ton of sense. And that's the early opportunities I saw around the NFL was chances to take equity in emerging technology, especially around social and digital, that you could get a general sense we're going to be pretty big, to allow for a little more experimentation so you can benefit from the upside while also behaving in a more innovative way.
It's rare to find a firm that has had so much success in consumer. How do you guys think about navigating the emerging trends within the consumer zeitgeist and decide where to invest?
We've also had plenty of losses, by the way, full disclosure. And the wins, I think, are because of our paradigm. Our paradigm is that we just refuse to take the hit. We put an unnatural amount of energy into trying to work on situations. And because it's a partnership between myself and Steve Ross, I do have the flexibility to be really creative. And if you just insist on living another day to figure it out, you will live another day. We generally take that paradigm to everything I'm involved in. Successful people, successful companies simply find a way. in terms of how to pick, number one, it always starts with the founder. It's such a cliche, right? You bet on the jockey, but like cliches exist for a reason. They help guide us and make it a little bit more efficient to recognize patterns. I always bet on the jockey. And the skills that I'm looking for, or the attributes or the fact pattern, is number one, I want somebody who steer the ship around the iceberg before it's on the bow, that you don't need to have evidence right in front of you that you are literally going to die if you don't change direction in order to make a decision. And I find the CEOs, the founders that are paralyzed and stubbornly refuse to pivot until it's inevitable, those are the ones that usually end up failing or have mediocre results. So I try to first and foremost find those who are likely to iterate, because the ultimate business will look nothing like the original PowerPoint. That is always true. So there's all these course corrections that need to be made along the way. And I find the personality profile that is likely to pivot before disaster is inevitable is a blend of confidence and humility. The confidence to look at and audit your own decision-making, and the humility to admit that you were wrong. If you have those two together, you tend to make those decisions with enough time. I feel like the universe is very forgiving. We tend to look at the world can be very unforgiving, but I actually think the universe, to me at least, has been very forgiving. It's always usually gives me an opportunity to fix my screw-ups before it's too late. But self-awareness is the lock, and self-awareness goes in hand with confidence and humility. And then if I call inevitability, I want to have the feeling that the founder is pursuing this business because it's inevitable. Like God or whatever deity you believe in puts you on this earth to make this business come to life. It doesn't mean it can't be a side hustle for a moment in time, but I want to feel like this is inevitable. Not that you were sitting in the class at your MBA and you just decided to engineer your way into this because it's a big TAM, total addressable market. I want it to be inevitable. So I know I'm giving you a lot, but like to me, the bets I make within consumer are less important than who I choose to back in consumer.
What would you say is the most memorable pitch you've had with a founder? Conversation that it was clear this is the ideal person to be starting this specific business at this point in time. It's clearly a fundamental shift from the status quo into a new future. Can you recall a specific pitch that stands out in memory?
Oh, that's such a good question. I like when the universe or the world or the conventional wisdom still is skeptical about this particular technology or sector. And to me, it just seems so obvious that it's going to happen, right? These macro tailwinds that I find irrefutable, but are still being refuted. Those are my favorite investments. So I'll give you two, and then one specifically an investment. Like I think lithium. Lithium was obvious starting around 2018, I would think, that the whole world's going to shift to lithium, and Elon Musk has figured out the electric car, right? So one tailwind. Another that I'm really excited about is eVTOL. I always thought that self-driving cars is a little bit of fool's gold. I'm not talking 20 years from now, there will be self-driving cars, but this idea that they're going to be here in 5 years is ludicrous because it requires too much collective action on the part of government. Anything that requires agencies to work together and infrastructure in order to materialize, to me, usually take 3 times as long because you're counting on the government. Self-driving cars, the technology part, once autonomy became an AI, became a reality, it's only a matter of time before you can make cars self-driving. But that's just the hardware. It's the system that it would take a long time. eVTOL, right? Electric vehicle takeoff and landing is an entirely different thing, right? It's just the ability, the underlying act of helicopters already happens. Helicopters are not scalable for a variety of reasons, but mostly noise. They're not viable in commercial centers, right? This idea that you can create vehicles that can transport people very quietly, energy efficient, and move them from airports or other into city centers is transformative and has applications in the military with delivery, even organ transplant. So I've always been excited about eVTOL, and I've been looking at the space for a while now. And then I met the founder of a company called Beta. And Beta is competing in the eVTOL space against Obi and a few of the other ones, Archer. But what I loved about the founder of Beta, it was like he was put on this earth to make this company. And I met him up in Vermont at his factory where he's building these incredible vehicles. The way he focused on one specific area of the market, organ transplants, which is a specific use case I could go on for an hour about this, but makes the most sense. Rather than simply saying, I'm going to promise Jetsons and flying cars, why don't I focus on a discrete use case that I know there's a definite need that needs to be resolved? And he did. And that's one of the first services they're going to be offering with these calls, and military and transport. So that to me I love those situations when all that constellation of factors come together. Founder meant to be put on this earth to do it, a sector that has a massive TAM, but still a little bit in the distance that people, doubt. To me, that's where the sweet spot of opportunity.
Matt, if we could feature anyone on the show, who should we interview and what topic would you like to hear them speak about?
Oh, wow. I'm fascinated by Cathie Wood because she is just embraces innovation, refuses to be cowed by the criticism. Obviously, for those of you who don't know, she runs ARC, big investment fund. They've had a tough year because they're heavy in tech and innovation, but she just believes the truth will win out. And she's almost got this evangelical quality about her, about innovation and how important innovation is to society. So I would love to hear you talk to her about how'd you get Tesla right when so many people thought you were nuts, right, for making the call she made. Actually undershot the market cap by hundreds of billions of dollars. That's how right she was. And then what's the next Tesla? What are people criticizing you for today for having such conviction in? And what are they wrong about? And why are they wrong? I'm always fascinated by patterns. Why are people wrong? Why do people find it so much easier to shoot down innovation than they do to embrace it, right? And love to hear her. So that I've just given you your mandate. You got to get Cathie Wood on your podcast.
Let's see what we can do. Matt, what resources have you found particularly valuable and would recommend to listeners, whether it's a book, a blog, or article, anything else that comes to mind?
The associate, what comes to the top of my mind, because I've been going deep on this topic lately. I'd still say the vast majority of the population believes that crypto is not real or a fad, or frankly doesn't understand it, or is a little bit uncomfortable about it. It reminds me of TikTok. Remember TikTok 3 years ago? I was like, what is this? And I was guilty. Like, not another service. Right now, TikTok is basically Google and Amazon all in one, right? It's become embedded in our society. The same is going to be true of crypto. And I think that people still are unduly skeptical about it. So I would argue, if you want to go deep and put your toe in, I would learn everything about ENS. ENS is basically the domain name registration system for wallets. And right now, if you have a wallet, a crypto wallet, it's basically your identification is 40 characters, 40 random characters. That's not a sustainable way for all of us to interact in a world where crypto is essential and DeFi is embedded in our society. And so wallets are going to have a simple identity, and that's the ENS system. The same way sites have a simple system called DNS. So Amazon is not really Amazon. Amazon is a string of random numbers and digits. But if we had to repeat them, you and I would never interact on Amazon. It would never be what it is today. So that's the same naming convention is happening for Web3. Called ENS. So that's one thing anybody listening, if you wish to lose yourself and go down the rabbit hole, just type in ENS into Twitter and you'll see some amazing threads that'll educate you on the space.
Matt, what do you know that you need to get better at?
I need to prioritize my health like everybody else, but I am working on that. I'm constantly always trying to lose weight. I need to sleep. That's the number one thing I need to get better at. I do not sleep very much.
How many hours do you get?
Oftentimes, maybe 4, but then sometimes I stay up for 2 or 3 days straight and just go down the rabbit hole on topics. And then I'll recover over the course of a couple of days. But I literally, no exaggeration, will stay up for 2 or 3 days, thinking, playing, learning. Not a healthy approach to life.
It sounds like you could use some sleep.
I feel good though. I'm talking to you. We're having a relaxed conversation. I got some sleep last night. But sometimes I do believe this. If you want to discern the patterns in life, you have to get so tactical and just immerse yourself under a compressed period of time, because that's when you'll glean these insights. And it doesn't work to I'll read a book for half an hour, or I won't get my hands dirty in figuring out what it means to transact. I'll just be able to repeat big words. I'm a believer in being a practitioner. So if I want to learn something, I go frighteningly tactical about it. You'd be shocked, or shockingly tactical, because that's where you glean these insights to see how the work is actually done. I brought Gary Vee to Harvard. It was actually a great class. And I'd see a lot of the students were skeptical. They only knew him from his Instagram posts, or there's different perceptions of Gary. And to me, he's family, but not everybody understands the breadth and depth of his mind. And they were asking, well, any good resources to learn Shopify and just e-com? The course I teach at HBS is called Moving Beyond Direct to Consumer, all about direct-to-consumer e-commerce business. And Gary's answer, which I loved, was, yeah, I have an idea. Go sell something. Find something that you buy at a yard sale or a Target and sell it for 2 times as much. And create your little Shopify site or do it on eBay, whatever. I want you to sell something, because if you really want to understand anything, you need to dip your toe in being a practitioner. So my advice to those out there who maybe beat themselves up about being more strategic, I say the opposite. Strategy is easy to discern, read books, think, meditate, be tactical, be a practitioner, and pick up the patterns.
And lastly, Matt, what is the best way for listeners to connect with you?
I like LinkedIn. I find that LinkedIn is like a warm bath. Civil discourse still rules. Shoot me a note over there on LinkedIn. Check it pretty regularly.
All right. Thanks again for coming on. This was a true pleasure.
All right. Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it. And I hope to connect with everybody out there listening. And one more shameless plug for my book, Burn the Boats, which comes out on February 14th, Valentine's Day.
Awesome. All right. Thank you again.
All right, that'll wrap up today's interview. If you enjoyed the episode or a previous one, let the guest know about it. Share your thoughts on social or shoot them an email. Let them know what particularly resonated with you. I can't tell you how much I appreciate that some of the smartest folks in venture are willing to take the time and share their insights with us. If you feel the same, a compliment goes a long way. Okay, that's a wrap for today. Until next time, remember to over-prepare, choose carefully, and invest confidently. Thanks so much for listening.